My golden child older sister deliberately set her wedding on the exact same day as mine. As expected, our parents chose to attend her ceremony to ensure she remained the center of attention. I did not throw a tantrum. I simply replied, I understand. On the wedding day, they rushed to check my venue, hoping to find me crying in an empty hall. Instead, they were left speechless by the empire I had built from their betrayal. Before I continue the story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to outsmart toxic relatives who tried to steal your joy. I am Harper, 29 years old and a corporate event director. I build high-stakes environments for Fortune 500 companies. My fiancé Julian is an estate and trust attorney. We deal in binding contracts, flawless logistics, and cold facts. My 32-year-old sister Chloe deals in illusions. She curates a fictional lifestyle on social media funded by hidden debt and our parents' endless enabling. The war began on a Tuesday evening during a family dinner at my parents' suburban home. Julian and I brought a bottle of vintage Bordeaux to celebrate. Over dessert, I announced our news. We had secured the Glass Conservatory. It is the most exclusive, heavily waitlisted botanical glasshouse in the state. Getting a Saturday evening booking there requires corporate leverage and flawless timing. I told my family our date was set for October 15th. My parents, Patricia and Richard, offered polite, measured congratulations. But I watched Chloe. The color drained from her face. Her knuckles turned white as she gripped the stem of her wine glass. Her jaw tightened into a rigid line. In her mind, the younger sister securing a venue she could never afford was a direct threat to her fabricated hierarchy. She smiled, showing teeth, and offered a hollow toast. 4 days later, Chloe summoned the family for an emergency brunch. She arrived holding the hand of Marcus, a 34-year-old tech entrepreneur. Marcus is a sharp, grounded man who built his wealth from scratch. He is genuinely kind, but at that point, he had not yet looked beneath the surface of the woman he was dating. Chloe raised her left hand, flashing a custom diamond ring. They were engaged. We offered our congratulations, but Chloe did not let the moment breathe. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table, her eyes locking onto mine. We already picked the date, Chloe announced, her tone dripping with rehearsed innocence. My spiritual advisor ran our charts. She said October 15th is the only auspicious day for our union this year, so we booked the Oak Creek Country Club. The air in the dining room turned stagnant. October 15th, my exact wedding date. The Oak Creek Country Club was a dated second-tier golf course venue, a stark contrast to my botanical glasshouse. She knew she could not beat my location, so she decided to sabotage my guest list. Julian shifted in his chair, his legal mind immediately processing the hostile maneuver. I placed my fork down on the porcelain plate. Patricia did not reprimand her eldest daughter for the blatant theft of a wedding date. Instead, my mother turned to me, her expression hardening into an expectation of compliance. Harper, you need to call your venue and reschedule, Patricia instructed, waving her hand as if dismissing a minor scheduling error. Chloe is older. She has waited so long for her special day. You are organized. You can easily shift your timeline. We cannot split the family on the same weekend. Richard nodded in agreement, slicing his steak. Let your sister have this one, Harper. Be reasonable. They demanded I surrender my deposit, my vendors, and my milestone to satisfy the ego of a woman who viewed my happiness as an insult. Chloe sat back in her chair, a faint, triumphant smirk playing on her lips, waiting for me to fold, just as I had done my entire childhood. I looked at my mother. I looked at my sister. I did not raise my voice. I did not shed a tear. I am not moving my date, I replied, my voice steady and cold. Julian and I will see you on the 15th, or we will not. Chloe's smirk faded. The silence that followed was heavy, signaling the end of polite family negotiation and the beginning of a relentless, calculated war. Chloe thought she was playing a simple game of family politics. She had no idea she was initiating a financial audit that would burn her fake empire to the ground. The drive back to our city apartment that night was wrapped in a dense, suffocating silence. I did not cry. I did not complain about the unfairness of my parents choosing my sister over me. In my line of work, navigating hostile corporate takeovers and mitigating event disasters requires a cold, analytical brain. You do not waste energy mourning a burned bridge when the fire is still spreading toward your house. Julian kept his hand steady on the steering wheel, his jaw set in a rigid line. As an attorney who spends his days dissecting complex trust funds and exposing hidden liabilities, he recognized my silence not as surrender, but as the quiet calibration of a counteroffensive. The next morning, I initiated my standard protocol. I treated my own wedding exactly like a high-stakes corporate summit. I bypassed traditional paper invitations. Paper is slow, untraceable, and vulnerable to interception. Instead, I utilized a proprietary digital management platform I reserved for my top-tier corporate clients. I designed sleek, encrypted digital invitations embedded with unique tracking pixels. These pixels allow me to monitor the exact telemetry of the delivery. I can see the precise timestamp when a guest opens the envelope, how long they linger on the page, and the moment they click their response. I hit send on the guest list of 200 people. I poured myself a cup of black coffee, sat back in my ergonomic office chair, and waited for the data to roll in. For the first 24 hours, the metrics aligned with standard event projections. Our friends, former university colleagues, and mutual business partners responded with enthusiastic confirmations. The green indicators on my digital dashboard lit up in a steady, predictable rhythm. But by the afternoon of the third day, a sharp, glaring anomaly disrupted the pattern. The red indicators began to flash. An RSVP rejection is normal. Scheduling conflicts exist. But the pattern emerging on my screen defied statistical probability. The rejections were not coming from peripheral acquaintances or distant colleagues. They were originating directly from the core of my extended family and a specific segment of high net worth individuals I had cultivated relationships with over the past decade. Aunt Clara, who had spent the last 3 Thanksgivings promising to let me wear her vintage pearl veil, clicked decline. Mr. Sterling, a retired event producer and my original industry mentor, submitted a formal rejection. Within 2 hours, 14 of my most crucial prominent guests had opted out of the October 15th ceremony. Furthermore, the tracking telemetry indicated a strange behavioral loop. The tracking pixels showed these specific guests opening the invitation, leaving the tab dormant for several hours, and then returning to decisively click the decline button. They were checking with a third party before making their decision. I did not throw my phone across the room. I set my coffee mug down on the glass desk and called Julian. He walked into my home office, loosening his silk tie after a long day of depositions. I pointed to the glowing red columns on the monitor. Julian leaned over my shoulder, his eyes scanning the datasets. He did not offer empty comfort. His legal mind instantly recognized the signature of coordinated interference. Someone was actively poisoning the jury pool. Julian pulled his encrypted work laptop from his leather briefcase and sat beside me. Law firms employ advanced forensic software to track digital footprints during contentious divorce proceedings or corporate fraud investigations. Julian plugged his device into our secure home network. He instructed me to reach out to just one of the declining guests under the guise of a polite follow-up. I chose Aunt Clara. I sent a brief, innocuous text asking if everything was all right. Aunt Clara, bless her lack of technological literacy, replied 10 minutes later. She did not just send a text, she forwarded a direct message she had received earlier that morning on a popular social media platform. Julian intercepted the forwarded data packet. His fingers flew across the keyboard, stripping away the surface interface to expose the raw metadata beneath. The message Aunt Clara forwarded appeared to come directly from the verified account of my mother, Patricia. We read the text illuminated on the screen. The wording was crafted with a sickening, faux sympathetic tone. The message read that Harper and Julian were facing sudden, severe financial hardships. The text claimed that my event business was failing and Julian had made poor investments. It stated that we were too proud to admit our insolvency, but the wedding was effectively paused. It went on to suggest that to save me from the humiliation of a canceled event, all family members and VIPs should redirect their attention and their registry gifts to Chloe and Marcus on the same date. The message concluded with a plea to keep this information secret to protect my fragile mental state. I stared at the words. My mother had always favored my sister, but orchestrating a targeted defamatory smear campaign to bankrupt my social standing crossed a line into pure sociopathy. Julian, however, was not focused on the emotional betrayal. He was tracing the digital architecture of the message. He ran a localized IP scan on the origination tag hidden within the forwarded text. Patricia did not write this. Julian stated, his voice a low clinical murmur. Your mother still types with her index fingers and struggles to attach a PDF to an email. She does not know how to blind copy a mass message across a social network. He hit the enter key, executing the final trace. A geographic coordinate pinged on his secondary monitor. The IP address did not route back to my parents' suburban colonial home. The signal originated from a luxury downtown loft. It was Chloe. My sister had quietly logged into my mother's social media account, utilizing the trust and authority of the matriarch to bypass any suspicion. She had weaponized our mother's digital identity to systematically assassinate my character, portraying me as a destitute failure to elevate her own status. She was not just stealing a date on the calendar, she was executing a hostile takeover of my entire support system. The rage I felt was not hot and chaotic. It was cold, sharp, and highly clarifying. My instinct, the old conditioned response from my childhood, urged me to pick up the phone, call my mother, and demand an explanation. But Chloe wanted a screaming match. She wanted me to sound unhinged and jealous, which would only validate the narrative she was currently spinning to Marcus. Marcus is a sharp tech founder who values stability and logic. If I acted like a hysterical younger sister, Chloe would play the victim, crying on his shoulder, securing his loyalty and his wallet. I placed my hand over Julian's wrist, stopping him from initiating a formal cease and desist order. Do not alert them, I instructed, keeping my eyes fixed on the fraudulent message. Download the raw access logs, save every timestamp, every IP ping, and every read receipt. Establish a pristine chain of custody for the digital evidence. Julian nodded, his fingers dancing across the keys, silently extracting the data and securing it behind a localized firewall. As the downloading progress bar filled the screen, the event director inside me began to analyze Chloe's broader logistical strategy. I knew the Oak Creek Country Club. It is an outdated venue with faded carpets and cheap catering packages. Chloe built her entire influencer brand on the aesthetic of effortless high-end luxury. She needed her wedding to look like $1 million production to secure her grip on Marcus and impress his elite circles. But Chloe was inherently lazy. She did not know how to source premium vendors. She did not have the industry connections to secure rare floral arrangements or bespoke catering on a condensed timeline. If she was desperate enough to steal my guests to fill her cheap venue, she was definitely desperate enough to realize she needed to feed and entertain them. She needed my high-end assets to mask the reality of her bargain bin location. I pulled up my master vendor spreadsheet. I highlighted the name of my primary floral supplier, a renowned importer who handled rare out-of-season blooms. The realization struck me with the force of a physical blow. Chloe was not going to stop at the guest list. She was actively hunting my supply chain, and I needed to intercept her before she infected the foundation of my event. The morning sun barely crested the downtown skyline when I parked my car outside the industrial warehouse district. In the event management industry, securing a reliable supply chain is the difference between a flawless execution and a catastrophic failure. After intercepting my sister's digital attack on my guest list, I knew her next logical target would be my physical assets. Chloe possessed the refined tastes of a billionaire, but lacked the operational knowledge to manifest them. She would inevitably try to steal what I had already built. I walked into the climate-controlled facility of my primary floral importer. The air inside the warehouse was crisp, maintained at a steady 42 degrees, smelling sharply of ozone, wet cardboard, and crushed stems. My supplier, a seasoned logistics expert named Elias, stood near a stainless steel staging table. He handles botanical imports for the most exclusive galas on the East Coast. We have executed dozens of high-stakes corporate events together. He understands the rigid boundaries of a binding contract. Elias saw me approach and set down his clipboard. He did not offer his usual warm greeting. His posture was tense, his eyes scanning the warehouse floor before meeting mine. He handed me a paper cup of black coffee, signaling that we needed to have a serious conversation off the official record. I took a sip of the bitter liquid, maintaining a relaxed stance. I asked him who tried to breach the perimeter of my October 15th reservation. Elias let out a heavy sigh, running a hand over his graying hair. He recounted the event with the precision of a man who despises uninvited drama in his workspace. Less than an hour before my arrival, the heavy metal doors of his loading dock had opened. Chloe walked in unannounced and without an appointment. She wore oversized designer sunglasses indoors and a pristine beige trench coat, treating the active industrial warehouse like her personal retail boutique. According to Elias, she marched straight to his administrative desk and demanded to review the floral manifest for my wedding. She specifically targeted the white peonies. Securing peonies in mid-October is a logistical nightmare. They are entirely out of season in North America. My arrangement required Elias to source the blooms from specialized high-altitude farms in the Chilean Andes, coordinate temperature-controlled cargo flights, and manage rigorous customs inspections. The reserve I held was the only batch arriving in the state that weekend. Chloe did not care about the logistics. She only cared about the aesthetic. She demanded Elias cancel my contract and reroute the entire floral shipment to the Oak Creek Country Club for her own ceremony. Elias told her the inventory was locked under a corporate retainer. He refused to break my contract. Chloe, operating on the delusion that capital erases all boundaries, reached into her designer handbag. She pulled out a sleek, heavy titanium credit card and slapped it onto his stainless steel counter. The card bore the name of her fiancé, Marcus. She offered Elias a 100% premium on top of my established rate, demanding he run the card immediately to secure the theft. Elias is a businessman. A double premium on imported Chilean peonies is a lucrative proposition, and he knew Marcus ran a highly successful technology firm. The capital backing the titanium card was supposedly limitless. To appease the frantic woman demanding service in his warehouse, Elias took the card and inserted it into his point-of-sale terminal. This was the exact moment Chloe's fabricated reality fractured. Elias looked me in the eye and described the digital response. The terminal processed the encrypted data for 3 seconds. Then the screen flashed a harsh red warning. The machine emitted a sharp, undeniable error tone. The transaction was denied. Chloe snatched the card back, her face flushing with sudden, intense heat. She blamed the terminal, claiming the magnetic reader was faulty. She ordered Elias to run the transaction again, instructing him to manually bypass the chip. Elias complied, typing the 16-digit sequence directly into the keypad. The system returned a second, more severe error code. It was not a standard decline for insufficient funds. The banking network had initiated a hard fraud lock on the account. Elias watched my sister unravel. The curated influencer persona evaporated in the cold warehouse air. Chloe began to sweat, the moisture ruining her flawless makeup. Her hands trembled as she pulled out her smartphone, frantically opening banking applications, her eyes darting across the screen in sheer panic. She muttered a disjointed excuse about a banking glitch, grabbed her handbag, and practically sprinted out of the loading dock, leaving the titanium card lying abandoned on the counter for a full 10 seconds before running back to retrieve it. I stood in the freezing warehouse, digesting the information. The event director in my mind stepped aside, allowing the forensic analyst to take over. Marcus is a self-made millionaire. He operates in a financial bracket where credit limits are theoretical. High-tier titanium accounts feature dedicated concierge services designed to facilitate exorbitant spontaneous purchases. If Marcus wanted to buy a luxury vehicle on a Tuesday morning, the card would clear the transaction without friction. Credit card algorithms are highly sophisticated. They do not trigger a hard fraud lock on a floral purchase for a wealthy client unless the account security network is already screaming. The defense mechanisms activate when the system detects erratic, unauthorized, or highly suspicious routing that deviates drastically from the cardholder's established spending patterns. If the card Marcus gave Chloe for wedding expenses was locked for suspected fraud, it meant she was bleeding his capital into dark, unregulated channels. She was executing transactions that the banking network deemed a critical threat to the account holder. The puzzle pieces began to align. Chloe was insisting on the outdated, cheap Oak Creek Country Club, yet she was trying to hijack my premium vendors using Marcus's wealth. She was playing a dangerous shell game. She intended to hire low-tier services for her actual event, but she needed a few stolen luxury items like my imported peonies to maintain the illusion of a high-end wedding. The question was not whether she was stealing from her future husband. The question was where the missing capital was flowing. I looked at Elias. I needed the raw data. I asked him for the printed merchant copy of the declined transaction. Elias hesitated. Handing over terminal receipts involving a third party crosses a delicate line of merchant confidentiality. He shifted his weight, mentioning privacy policies and banking regulations. I did not pressure him with threats. I relied on the cold arithmetic of our business relationship. I reminded him that my corporate firm directs hundreds of thousands of dollars in annual contracts to his warehouse. I pointed out that Chloe had just attempted to bribe him to break a legally binding agreement, which in itself was tortious interference. I was not asking for the receipt to ruin his reputation. I was asking for the receipt to protect my own supply chain from a volatile, compromised individual. Elias understood the leverage. He walked over to the terminal, tapped the screen to access the internal memory log, and printed the specific transaction record. The small thermal printer hummed, dispensing a rectangular slip of paper. He tore it off and handed it to me. I studied the black ink on the white paper. The receipt displayed the exact timestamp of her intrusion. It showed the attempted purchase amount, a staggering figure meant to secure the stolen flowers. More importantly, it displayed the specific alphanumeric error code generated by the issuing bank, along with the last 4 digits of Marcus's titanium card. This small slip of thermal paper was no longer just a record of a failed botanical purchase. It was the genesis of a financial audit. It was physical proof that the golden child of our family was hiding a catastrophic liability behind her bridal veil. I folded the receipt carefully and slid it into the inner pocket of my tailored blazer. I thanked Elias for his discretion, assuring him that our contract remained solid and the Chilean shipments were to proceed exactly as planned. I turned and walked out of the cold storage facility, stepping back into the warming morning air. My sister thought she was engaged in a petty sibling rivalry over a date on the calendar. She believed her manipulation of our parents and her theft of my guest list were brilliant tactical victories. She failed to realize that her sloppy execution had just handed me the exact weapon I needed to dismantle her entire future. I unlocked my car door, sat in the driver's seat, and pulled out my phone. I dialed Julian's number, ready to hand the digital evidence over to a man who dismantles fraudulent estates for a living. The wedding sabotage had officially escalated into an investigation of grand larceny. I left the industrial warehouse district and steered my car directly toward the financial center of the city. Julian is a senior partner at a firm specializing in estate law and asset protection. His office occupies the 42nd floor of a glass tower, a sterile environment built on confidentiality and ruthless arithmetic. I did not bother making an appointment. I bypassed the receptionist, walked straight into his corner suite, and placed the crumpled thermal receipt onto his mahogany desk. Julian looked up from a stack of depositions. He noted the rigid posture of my shoulders and the cold focus in my eyes. He picked up the slip of paper. Chloe tried to hijack the Chilean peony shipment this morning. I stated, my voice echoing slightly in the quiet room. She walked into the cold storage facility and offered Elias a double premium to break my contract. She tried to pay with a titanium card registered to Marcus. The system rejected the transaction. Julian studied the printed alphanumeric code at the bottom of the receipt. His legal mind shifted gears, transitioning from estate planning to forensic auditing. "This is not a standard insufficient funds denial," Julian murmured, tracing the ink with his premium fountain pen. "This specific sequence is a hard lock initiated by the fraud department of the issuing bank. A titanium tier account does not freeze over a floral purchase unless the algorithms detect a severe breach in the spending architecture." He set the pen down and turned toward his dual monitors. Julian possesses access to proprietary databases used by asset recovery specialists and private investigators. These networks bypass the curated illusions of social media and dig straight into the grim reality of public records, tax liens, and hidden liabilities. "Give me 10 minutes, Julian said, his fingers flying across the mechanical keyboard. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the sprawling city. For years, my sister had crafted an entire identity around the concept of effortless affluence. She spent her days unboxing limited-edition designer handbags, on camera posting curated travel content from luxury resorts, and cultivating an audience of envious followers. She treated our parents' suburban home like a free hotel, demanding they fund her baseline existence while she chased the illusion of elite status. I built a tangible business from the ground up. Chloe built a house of cards. The rhythmic clicking of Julian's keyboard stopped. He let out a low whistle, a sound he reserved for catastrophic financial discoveries. "You need to see this," Julian instructed, gesturing toward his screen. I walked behind his leather chair and leaned over his shoulder. The monitor displayed a complex web of digital transactions, court summons, and obscure corporate filings. The curated influencer persona, Chloe, projected online, fractured and dissolved into a terrifying portrait of desperation. "She is hemorrhaging capital," Julian explained, highlighting a series of red columns on the spreadsheet. "The designer bags, the luxury vacations, the premium lifestyle content, none of it was sponsored. None of it was funded by actual revenue. She financed her entire public identity through unregulated debt." He opened a secondary window displaying a series of obscure filings. "She exhausted her traditional credit lines 2 years ago." Julian continued, his tone clinical and detached. "When the major banks cut her off, she migrated to the shadow economy. She took out high-velocity microloans from predatory lenders. These are not institutions that negotiate payment plans. They operate on compound interest rates designed to trap the borrower in a permanent cycle of insolvency." I scanned the numbers. The principal amounts were staggering, but the accrued interest painted a lethal picture. "What is the total liability?" I asked. Julian highlighted the final cell at the bottom of the ledger, 150,000. The number hung in the quiet office. $150,000 of unsecured predatory debt. Chloe was not just struggling to keep up appearances, she was drowning. But a woman drowning in shadow debt does not confidently walk into a floral warehouse and attempt to drop $20,000 on imported out-of-season blooms. She would need a lifeline. She would need an immediate, substantial influx of clean capital to mask the smell of her own financial rot. Julian anticipated my thought process. He initiated a new search cross-referencing Chloe's public footprint with Marcus's corporate holdings. Marcus is a methodical tech founder. He operates with clean ledgers and clear boundaries. However, men in love often make singular fatal compromises. Julian breached a public registry and found a newly established joint marital account opened just 3 weeks prior. Marcus funded a dedicated wedding account, Julian stated, pulling up the routing history. Initial deposit $200,000. He handed her the operating budget to build her dream ceremony. I stared at the screen, the pieces of the puzzle snapping into place with lethal precision. Marcus transferred the capital, expecting her to hire premium vendors, secure an elite venue, and manage the logistics. He handed her the keys to a small fortune, trusting her to execute a celebration worthy of his social standing. Julian tracked the outbound wire transfers from that specific joint account. The money was not flowing to catering companies, event planners, or bridal boutiques. Look at the destination routing numbers, Julian pointed out, his voice sharp. She withdrew $30,000 last Tuesday, another $25,000 on Friday. She is wiring chunks of the wedding budget directly to a series of obscure limited liability companies registered in Delaware. I recognize the corporate structures. I deal with shell companies frequently in the corporate event sector. Those are not vendors, I said, my pulse maintaining a slow, steady rhythm. Those are collection agencies. Julian nodded. She is siphoning the wedding fund. She is using Marcus's capital to systematically pay down her predatory loans before the shadow lenders file civil suits and expose her fraud. The strategic architecture of her entire wedding plan suddenly made perfect, terrifying sense. This is why she booked the Oak Creek Country Club, I murmured, stepping back from the desk. Oak Creek is a faded second-tier golf course. They offer bundled wedding packages for a fraction of the cost of a premium venue. A full ceremony and reception at Oak Creek might cost $20,000 or $30,000. But Chloe is engaged to a millionaire. Marcus expects a $100,000 production. She is running a classic embezzlement scheme. I continued speaking the reality into existence. She plans to hire the cheapest, lowest-tier vendors on the market. She will book a budget caterer, a mediocre photographer, and a discount band. But she will generate fake invoices. She will bill Marcus using the pricing metrics from my high-end vendors. She will quote him the cost of the glass conservatory while paying for Oak Creek. She will pocket the $70,000 variance and wire it straight to her loan sharks. Julian leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. And she tried to buy your imported peonies today because Marcus likely asked to see a physical receipt or some tangible proof that she was actually securing premium assets. She panicked. She tried to use his titanium card to buy one legitimate luxury item to maintain the cover story. But the bank algorithms flagged her erratic spending history and locked the account. Your sister was not just a spoiled, entitled bride. She was actively committing felony wire fraud and embezzlement against her future husband. We hold the kill switch, Julian stated softly. I can draft a digital dossier. I can compile the shadow debt, the fake invoices, and the offshore routing numbers. We can hand this file directly to Marcus tonight. The wedding would be canceled by morning. I looked at the thermal receipt resting on the mahogany desk. The temptation to drop the bomb and end the war was a powerful lure. But handing a file to Marcus in private would allow Chloe to spin a narrative. She would cry. She would claim she was a victim of predatory lending. She would manipulate our parents into defending her, framing me as a jealous sibling trying to ruin her relationship with a wealthy man. A private execution offered her room to maneuver. I do not want a quiet cancellation, I replied, picking up the receipt and sliding it into my blazer pocket. If we expose her now, she will play the victim. Our parents will protect her. She needs to build her own gallows. She needs to stand in front of hundreds of people wearing a white dress, believing she has successfully stolen my life and secured her bailout. Julian understood the strategy. A lawyer knows that a case is always stronger when the defendant commits perjury on the stand. I turned toward the door. I have a fitting for my bridal gown this afternoon. Chloe has been tracking my itinerary. I guarantee she will attempt to stage another physical confrontation to assert dominance before the wedding day. Let her think she is winning, Julian advised, opening a new file on his computer to begin compiling the financial dossier. I walked out of the glass suite, stepping into the elevator. The cold reality of the situation fortified my resolve. Chloe was fighting a war for aesthetics and petty jealousy. I was now managing a controlled demolition. She wanted to steal my spotlight. I was going to let her stand directly under it right before the entire structure collapsed on her head. The air inside the downtown bridal atelier smelled of white tea and steamed fabric. The boutique operated by appointment only, an exclusive sanctuary designed for high-net-worth clients who demanded flawless execution. I stood on a circular velvet pedestal surrounded by floor-to-ceiling mirrors. My reflection stared back wrapped in a custom gown crafted from imported Italian Charmeuse silk. The fabric was cut on the bias, an unforgiving technique that requires the garment to drape like liquid over the precise measurements of the wearer. It contained zero synthetic elasticity. The dress was engineered for my exact frame, a delicate masterpiece valued at $15,000. My lead stylist knelt at the hem, securing the final pins. In the event management sector, a timeline is a sacred contract. My fitting was scheduled 6 weeks prior to the October 15th date. Everything was proceeding with calculated perfection. The brass bell above the heavy glass entrance door chimed, shattering the hushed, serene atmosphere of the salon. I did not need to turn around to identify the intruders. The frantic, heavy footsteps echoing across the hardwood floor belonged to a woman who treated every public space like her own personal stage. Chloe marched into the exclusive boutique, dragging a cheap, opaque plastic garment bag behind her. Our mother, Patricia, trailed a few steps behind, carrying a designer purse and an expression of manufactured distress. Chloe had been tracking my digital calendar. My itinerary was synchronized with our shared family cloud, a remnant of a naive era when I believed sharing details would foster connection. She timed this intrusion perfectly. The boutique manager, a poised woman named Genevieve, stepped forward to intercept them, offering a polite but firm reminder that the salon required advance booking. Patricia waved a hand in the air, dismissing the manager as if she were a nuisance. "This is an emergency," Patricia declared, her voice carrying a shrill pitch that disrupted the quiet elegance of the room. "My eldest daughter is a bride in crisis. We need immediate assistance." Chloe dropped the plastic garment bag onto a pristine white sofa. She let out a dramatic, breathless sigh, placing a hand over her chest. "The seamstress ruined my dress," Chloe announced to the room, projecting her voice to ensure everyone heard the tragedy. "She butchered the bodice. The entire silhouette is uneven. I cannot walk down the aisle in a defective garment." I remained on the velvet pedestal, watching the performance through the reflection in the mirrors. Her narrative was a transparent fabrication. The forensic audit Julian and I conducted the previous night provided the real context. Chloe had siphoned the wedding funds Marcus provided, funneling the cash to her shadow lenders. She could not afford a premium tailor. She had undoubtedly taken her discount gown to a low-tier alteration shop, and the resulting disaster was merely a consequence of her own embezzlement. Genevieve maintained her professional composure, explaining that their atelier only serviced custom orders and did not perform emergency alterations on outside garments. Chloe ignored the manager. Her gaze swept across the salon and locked onto me. She stared at the liquid silk clinging to my frame. The envy radiating from her was a palpable force in the room. She looked at the intricate beadwork, the flawless draping, and the sheer expense of the gown. Her eyes narrowed. The panic regarding her own ruined dress evaporated, replaced instantly by a predatory calculation. "Take it off," Chloe ordered, stepping toward the pedestal. I looked down at her. "Excuse me. I need to see how that silhouette looks on me," Chloe demanded, her tone shifting from victimhood to entitlement. "If my dress is ruined, I have to order a replacement today. We have similar coloring. I need to try yours on right now to see if this designer works for my frame." Genevieve stepped between us, her professional mask slipping to reveal genuine alarm. "Ma'am, that gown is a bespoke creation. It is tailored to the exact millimeter of her measurements. The silk is highly delicate and does not stretch. It cannot accommodate a different physical structure." Chloe's face flushed with indignation. She possessed a larger, broader frame than I did, a reality she constantly masked with digital filters on her social media platforms. Suggesting a garment might not fit her was an insult to her curated illusion. Patricia stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on her eldest daughter's shoulder, validating the delusion. "Harper, do not be selfish," Patricia scolded, looking at me with cold disapproval. "Your sister is under immense stress. She is the older bride, and her wedding is a major societal event. You have plenty of time to figure your own outfit out. Step down and let her try the dress. It is just a piece of fabric. Be accommodating for once in your life." The silence in the salon deepened. Genevieve looked at me, her eyes pleading with me to refuse the absurd demand, ready to summon security to eject the trespassers. The instinct of a younger sibling would be to argue to protect her belongings, to fight back against the relentless theft of her joy. But I no longer operated on sibling instincts. I operated like a corporate auditor mitigating a hostile vendor. If I refused, Patricia would spend the next 2 weeks weaponizing my refusal. She would call every extended relative painting me as a cruel, unsupportive sister who denied a bride in crisis a simple favor. Chloe would spin a narrative of my supposed jealousy. It would become a chaotic, emotional distraction. However, physics is a rigid discipline. Italian silk possesses zero tensile give. Chloe's frame was significantly wider across the shoulders and the waist. Forcing a size 10 body into a size 4 bespoke silk gown would not result in a fashion revelation. It would result in structural failure. In corporate negotiations, when a bad actor demands to cross a boundary that will inevitably destroy them, you do not stand in their way. You step aside, hand them the rope, and document the breach of contract. I looked at Genevieve. I offered a slow, deliberate nod. Let her try it on, I said, my voice eerily calm. Genevieve hesitated, but the authority in my tone left no room for debate. The stylist quickly unpinned the hem and unfastened the hidden zipper at the back of the gown. I stepped out of the silk pool, changing back into my street clothes behind a velvet curtain. Chloe snatched the hanger from the stylist. She did not handle the garment with care. She dragged the delicate silk across the carpet and marched into the largest fitting room. Patricia followed, hovering near the door like a proud guardian. Genevieve stood next to me, wringing her hands. "The seams will not hold," the manager whispered, her voice laced with dread. "I know," I replied, checking the time on my wristwatch. From behind the closed door of the fitting room, the sounds of a physical struggle commenced. I heard Chloe grunt, followed by Patricia offering strained encouragement. "Suck in your breath, darling, just pull the fabric over your hips." The silk rustled in protest. The structure of the dress was fighting a losing battle against the sheer force of my sister's delusion. "I cannot get the zipper past my waist," Chloe complained, her voice tight with exertion. "Pull it harder, Mom. Just force the track up." A sharp, violent sound tore through the quiet elegance of the boutique. It was a distinct, unmistakable noise, the harsh, abrupt crack of premium silk splitting along a reinforced seam. The sound of thousands of dollars of meticulous craftsmanship snapping under brute physical force. A gasp echoed from the fitting room. The door swung open. Chloe stood in front of the mirror. The gown was a catastrophe. The side seam had ruptured entirely from the rib cage down to the thigh. The delicate bias cut hung in jagged, ruined ribbons, exposing her undergarments. The zipper track was mangled, the teeth bent out of alignment. She had transformed a $15,000 masterpiece into worthless, torn fabric. Chloe stared at her reflection, her face pale. For a fraction of a second, genuine panic flashed in her eyes, but her narcissistic defense mechanisms initiated a rapid recalibration. She could not accept fault. She needed a scapegoat. "This material is incredibly cheap," Chloe sneered, stepping out of the ruined dress and letting it drop onto the floor. "The craftsmanship is pathetic. It just fell apart the second I moved. You should demand a refund, Harper. The designer scammed you." Patricia nodded in fervent agreement, refusing to acknowledge the physical reality of what had just occurred. "It was an accident," Patricia declared, waving a dismissive hand. "The dress was clearly defective, and honestly, Harper, it was too tight anyway. You can afford to buy a new one. Do not make a scene over a simple mistake." They expected me to cry. They expected me to scream at them, to mourn the loss of my wedding gown, providing them with the dramatic emotional reaction they craved. I did not shed a single tear. I did not raise my voice. I did not even look at the torn silk on the floor. I turned my attention to the boutique manager. "Genevieve," I said, my tone echoing the crisp efficiency of a boardroom executive. "I need you to draft a formal invoice for the total replacement cost of the destroyed garment, including the rush fees required to tailor a new piece." "Of course," Genevieve replied, her hands shaking slightly as she walked toward her computer terminal. "Do not put the invoice under my account," I instructed, my eyes locking onto Chloe. "Place the invoice directly under the name Chloe Hastings." Chloe scoffed, crossing her arms. "I am not paying for a defective dress. You are insane." I pointed toward the corner of the ceiling. A sleek black dome housing a high-definition security camera stared down at the showroom floor. "The camera covers the entire salon, including the entrance to the fitting room," I stated, speaking with the cold, measured cadence of a prosecutor laying out a timeline. "It recorded you forcing your way into a garment you were explicitly warned not to wear. It recorded the destruction of private property. In the state penal code, intentionally destroying an asset valued over $10,000 is classified as felony property damage." The color drained from Patricia's face. "Harper, stop this nonsense right now. You are not threatening your sister with the police." "I am not threatening anyone," I replied, retrieving my coat. "I am establishing a liability chain. Genevieve will email you the invoice. You have 48 hours to process the payment. If the ledger is not balanced by Friday, the boutique will hand the security footage over to the local precinct and file a formal police report." Chloe's jaw dropped. The reality of the financial trap snapped around her ankle. She was already drowning in $150,000 of shadow debt. She had embezzled her wedding fund. Now she was legally on the hook for another $15,000 backed by high-definition video evidence. If a police investigation was triggered, Marcus would find out. The shadow lenders would find out. The entire facade would collapse before she even reached the altar. I walked toward the glass entrance door, leaving my mother and my sister standing in the center of the quiet boutique, staring at the ruined pile of silk on the floor. The physical conflict was over, the weapon had been forged. But I knew my parents would not accept this defeat silently. By holding Chloe accountable, I had challenged the core hierarchy of our family, and they were preparing to deliver an ultimatum designed to force my total surrender. The $15,000 invoice from the bridal atelier was settled exactly 47 hours after the imported silk tour. Julian tracked the digital routing number through his firm's forensic software. The funds did not originate from my parents' checking accounts. The capital was wired from a newly formed Delaware limited liability company, a classic front utilized by shadow lending syndicates. Chloe had doubled down on her toxic, high-interest debt to avoid a felony property damage charge. She was pulling herself deeper into a financial abyss just to maintain her fragile illusion of control, borrowing from predators to sanitize a crime she committed out of pure jealousy. I secured a replacement gown, a vintage archive piece from a private European dealer, paying with clean, untraceable capital. The logistics of my own life remained pristine. 2 weeks remained until October 15th. The operational framework for the glass conservatory was locked. Floor plans were approved by the fire marshal. The premium catering staff was finalized and briefed on the dietary restrictions of our VIP guests. I sat in my corner office at the agency reviewing the digital seating chart on my dual monitors. The quiet hum of the central air conditioning provided a steady, isolating white noise. My personal cell phone vibrated across the glass surface of my desk. The caller identification displayed my father. I picked up the device, swiping the screen to accept the connection. The ambient audio profile indicated they were using a speakerphone. Patricia and Richard were broadcasting together from their suburban living room, a tactical choice designed to present a unified, impenetrable front. I bypassed the standard polite greeting. Patricia initiated the conversation, her voice carrying a practiced, solemn weight. She sounded like a diplomat delivering sanctions across a demilitarized zone. "Harper, we need to have a serious discussion about the 15th, my mother announced. "The tension in the extended family is reaching an unsustainable level. Your aunts and uncles are confused. People in our social circle are whispering. It is creating a highly toxic environment for your sister." I leaned back in my ergonomic chair. I noted the specific phrasing. My sister orchestrating a smear campaign attempting to hijack my supply chain and destroying private property was framed as an environmental hazard happening to her rather than actions she actively committed. The accountability was entirely inverted. "Chloe is fragile right now," Richard chimed in, his tone thick with misguided paternal protection. "She is under immense pressure planning her celebration. She is highly sensitive to the optics of the situation. You have always been the independent one, Harper. You are resilient. You do not need our validation the way she does." The setup was transparent. They were paving the runway to deliver their final verdict. They needed to frame my competence as a shield, a reason why I deserved to absorb the upcoming blow while painting Chloe's incompetence as a vulnerability that required their desperate protection. "We have made a decision," Patricia stated, her voice hardening into a decree. "Your father and I will be attending the ceremony at the Oak Creek Country Club. We will stand by Chloe. She needs our support on her milestone day." The words hung in the digital connection. They were officially abandoning my wedding. The parents who raised me, who lived a mere 30 minutes away, were formally declining their invitation to watch me walk down the aisle. They were choosing to endorse a fraudulent production funded by embezzlement and shadow debt, punishing the daughter who built a clean ledger to reward the daughter who built a house of cards. I did not interrupt. I let the silence force them to keep talking, allowing them to dig the trench deeper. Furthermore, Patricia continued, emboldened by my lack of resistance. "We expect you to do the right thing here. Having 2 weddings on the exact same day is an embarrassment to this family. It forces our friends and relatives to pick sides, and it is a logistical nightmare. We want you to cancel your event at the conservatory. You can postpone it to next spring." Richard cleared his throat, attempting to soften the execution with a financial bandage. "We will write you a check to cover your lost deposits, Harper. We will make it right financially. Just call your venue management today, release the date, and let your sister have her moment in the sun. Do not be the reason this family falls apart over a calendar dispute." A daughter operating on emotional instinct would have shattered. She would have screamed through the receiver listing the federal crimes Chloe had committed, begging for her parents to open their eyes and see the truth. She would have cried over the sheer injustice of being discarded so casually for the benefit of a parasite. I am not that daughter. I am an event director who navigates hostile corporate takeovers and multi-million-dollar logistical failures. When a vendor or a partner proves to be an active liability, you do not mourn the relationship. You sever the tie, minimize your structural exposure, and recalibrate your assets for maximum return on investment. My parents were no longer family members. They were compromised variables. They were demanding I dismantle a premium, flawless event to protect a sister who was hurtling toward a wire fraud indictment. I looked at the glowing monitors on my desk. I looked at the finalized, pristine blueprints for the Glass Conservatory. I understand, I replied. My voice was a flat, even line. It was devoid of any discernible emotion, offering no anger, no sorrow, and no negotiation. A collective exhale echoed through the speakerphone. Patricia let out a soft, triumphant sigh. She believed she had won. She believed she had successfully crushed my boundaries and forced my compliance, relying on the same conditioning she had utilized throughout my entire childhood. Thank you, Harper, Patricia said, her tone dripping with a sudden artificial warmth that made my skin crawl. You are making the mature choice. We knew you would see reason once we explained the stakes. Call the venue today and get this sorted out. We will talk soon. The line disconnected with a sharp click. I set the phone down on the glass desk. The office was silent again. The chessboard was now perfectly set. My parents had formally removed themselves from my guest list, absolving me of any lingering familial obligation to protect them from the impending fallout. Chloe believed she had secured the date, the guests, and the undivided attention of our parents. She believed the October 15th calendar slot belonged exclusively to her, a hard-won trophy she could parade in front of her millionaire fiancé. I did not shed a single tear. A slow, calculated smile altered the rigid lines of my face. I picked up my secure office phone. I did not call my caterers to cancel. I did not draft a pathetic email to my guests apologizing for a postponed ceremony. I dialed the direct executive line for the management group that owned the Glass Conservatory. The general manager, a sharp logistics operator named David, answered on the second ring. David, I said, keeping my posture straight, tapping my gold pen against a leather notebook. I am looking at my master contract for the 15th. I hold the exclusive rights to the entire property, including the botanical gardens and the main atrium, from noon until midnight. That is correct, Harper. David confirmed, his tone professional and alert, recognizing the cadence of a serious inquiry. We are fully staffed and prepped for your load-in. Is there an issue with the timeline or the vendor access? No issue with the timeline, I replied, my eyes scanning a secondary corporate database I had opened on my left monitor. But I need to initiate a strategic pivot. I am restructuring the nature of the reservation. I knew a piece of vital industry intelligence that David did not yet possess. In the high-stakes world of corporate event planning, premium geography and precise timing are the most valuable currencies on the market. I had secured this conservatory 18 months in advance. However, a major Silicon Valley technology conglomerate, Apex Innovators in the artificial intelligence sector, had recently relocated their East Coast headquarters to our city. They were currently in a state of frantic internal crisis, searching for an elite high-capacity venue to host a surprise global product launch on that exact same weekend. Their parameters required transparent architecture, integrated high-voltage grids for media displays, and a flawless aesthetic. The Glass Conservatory fit their needs perfectly, but the venue was booked solid for the next 2 years. The tech conglomerate was desperate, and desperate corporations possess limitless aggressive capital. I am not canceling my contract, I informed David, my voice dropping into a register of pure clinical business. I am exercising the specific transfer clause embedded in Section 4 of my agreement. I am going to broker the space. Get your corporate legal team on the line. We are about to execute a buyout that will double your quarterly revenue. The petty familial dispute was over. The corporate maneuver had officially begun. The executive line to the management group of the Glass Conservatory remained connected. David, the general manager, sat in his office on the other end of this cellular network, processing the shift in my tone. In the premium event industry, dates are treated like prime real estate. An October Saturday night at a Glass botanical venue is a scarce commodity. Relinquishing it is rare. Brokering it is an act of sheer corporate leverage. I did not waste time with pleasantries. I laid out the precise architecture of the deal. A prominent Silicon Valley technology conglomerate currently expanding their footprint on the East Coast required an elite venue for an emergency product launch. Their hardware utilized advanced projection mapping and required a transparent ceiling structure to interface with an external drone light show. The Glass Conservatory was the only location within a 200-mile radius that met their technical parameters. The tech executives were panicking, and panic generates a high tolerance for exorbitant pricing. I hold the primary lease for the entire property on the 15th. I explained, pulling up the contract terms on my monitor. I hold the permits for the high-voltage grid tap. I also hold the retained contracts for the premium catering staff and the valet network. I am willing to execute a full transfer of my rights to the tech conglomerate, but the buyout will require a premium transition fee. David understood the math instantly. The venue would collect their standard operating fees from the tech company, plus a percentage of the transfer. It was a windfall for his management group, requiring zero marketing effort. He patched in the lead legal counsel for the tech firm on a secure conference line. For the next 2 hours, my office transformed from a wedding planning headquarters into a corporate war room. Julian walked in, took the seat across from my desk, and opened his laptop. While I dictated the logistical handover of the labor contracts and the lighting permits, Julian navigated the legal liabilities. He drafted a watertight assignment of rights. The tech executives, desperate to secure the location, did not negotiate the price. They accepted my initial demand. I charged them exactly 3 times the total value of my original wedding budget. Julian added one critical non-negotiable clause to the transfer agreement. He mandated an ironclad non-disclosure agreement binding both the tech conglomerate and the venue management staff. The nature of the event, the corporate buyout, and the cancellation of my personal ceremony were to remain strictly confidential until the doors opened on the evening of October 15th. No public press releases, no updated venue calendars on their public website. The executives agreed. The digital ink dried on the contracts. Less than 40 minutes later, my banking application sent a push notification to my phone. I logged into the secure portal. A staggering 6-figure wire transfer had successfully cleared the holding account and deposited directly into my primary ledger. The capital injection was immediate and liquid. Julian closed his laptop, the soft click echoing in my office. He leaned back, adjusting his cuffs. "Your wedding in the United States is officially erased," Julian stated, his voice carrying a calm, pragmatic weight. "We have no venue, we have no catering, we have a deactivated guest list." I looked at the glowing numbers on my screen. I did not feel a sense of loss. The traditional American wedding, with its forced family compromises and performative traditions, had become a toxic liability. By liquidating the event, I had excised the infection. My parents believed they had punished me by withdrawing their attendance. They believed they had left me with an empty hall and a shattered ego. Instead, their betrayal provided the exact operational freedom I required to execute a highly lucrative corporate transaction. "We do not have a domestic wedding," I corrected, looking across the desk at my fiancé. "But we have a substantial influx of clean capital, and we have the ultimate cover story." The physical reality of the event was gone, but the digital illusion needed to thrive. Chloe operated entirely within the realm of social media optics. Her baseline reality was dictated by whatever appeared on her screen. To ensure she marched blindly toward her own destruction, I needed her to believe I was desperately trying to salvage my ruined day. I spent the next 2 weeks maintaining a meticulously curated phantom timeline. I utilized my archive of event planning photographs. I posted a high-resolution image of a blank seating chart on my social media stories, accompanied by a vague, weary caption about the stress of managing last-minute cancellations. I uploaded a short video of myself tasting a slice of vanilla bean cake, a clip filmed months ago during an initial vendor meeting. I tagged the geolocation near the conservatory. The tracking metrics on my social media accounts provided a fascinating psychological study. Every time I posted an update regarding my fake wedding preparations, Chloe was the first viewer. Her profile icon appeared in the analytics within minutes of the upload. She did not interact directly. She did not leave a comment or send a message. But her digital footprint revealed her exact state of mind. She was watching me closely, feeding her own narcissism. Shortly after I posted the image of the blank seating chart, Chloe uploaded a vibrant, heavily filtered video of herself holding a stack of cheap, glossy invitations. Her caption boasted about her overflowing guest list and the overwhelming support of her family, a direct passive-aggressive strike aimed at my fabricated misery. She believed I was suffering in silence. She pictured me sitting alone in our apartment, crying over a spreadsheet, trying to figure out how to fill a massive botanical glasshouse without my parents or my extended family. The narrative of my failure was the oxygen keeping her afloat. It distracted her from the suffocating reality of her own shadow debt. While Chloe focused on my digital decoy, Julian and I focused on the execution of the final trap. We sat at our kitchen island late one evening. The city lights flickered through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Julian slid a sleek encrypted USB drive across the granite countertop. The small metal device contained the culmination of his forensic accounting efforts. It held the truth. The compiled data included the routing numbers from Marcus's joint wedding account, tracking the wire transfers directly to the predatory lending syndicates. It contained the fake invoices Chloe had drafted pricing out premium catering while actually booking budget buffets. It documented the exact timeline of her embezzlement. We had the weapon. The challenge was the delivery mechanism. If I emailed the dossier to Marcus, Chloe would intercept the fallout. She would monitor his inbox, delete the message, or spin a frantic web of lies claiming her devices were hacked by a jealous sibling. If I mailed a physical package to their loft, she would recognize my handwriting and destroy the evidence before he ever returned from his corporate office. The delivery required precision. It needed to be a physical handoff conducted in a neutral environment, allowing Marcus to receive the intelligence without her interference. Marcus is a creature of intense routine. Successful tech founders rarely deviate from their daily operational schedules. I accessed his public corporate profile and cross-referenced his recent media interviews. He frequently mentioned a specific artisanal coffee bar located in the financial district, a quiet establishment favored by executives for early morning strategy sessions. He visited the shop every Tuesday and Thursday at precisely 7:00 in the morning before heading to his high-rise headquarters. I picked up the USB drive, the cool metal resting heavy in my palm. The digital shard was functioning perfectly. Chloe was entirely consumed by her own vanity and my fabricated suffering. She was busy trying to squeeze into a cheap gown and micromanaging substandard vendors, completely oblivious to the lethal financial audit hovering over her engagement. It was time to introduce the bridegroom to the reality of his investment. It was time to hand Marcus the magnifying glass and let him inspect the rotting foundation of his future marriage. I placed the drive into my designer leather tote, verifying my alarm was set for 6:00 in the morning. The quiet phase of the operation was over. The active demolition was about to commence. The alarm on my nightstand chimed at 6:00 in the morning. I did not hit snooze. I stepped out of bed, moving with the quiet, deliberate focus of a negotiator preparing for a hostile boardroom arbitration. I bypassed my casual weekend attire and selected a tailored navy blue blazer, a crisp white silk blouse, and pointed leather heels. Chloe had spent the last 2 weeks broadcasting a narrative to Marcus and my extended family that I was a destitute, emotionally unstable woman mourning a canceled wedding. My physical presentation this morning needed to instantly shatter that illusion. I needed to look like a senior corporate director who held all the leverage. I left the apartment and hailed a car to the financial district. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of roasted espresso and damp asphalt. I walked into the artisanal coffee bar Marcus frequented. The establishment catered to a specific demographic: dark mahogany paneling, brass fixtures, and a clientele composed entirely of hedge fund managers, tech executives, and corporate attorneys reviewing morning briefs. I ordered a flat white, took a seat at a high marble table near the front window, and opened my tablet. I did not look like a frantic sister seeking revenge. I looked like a peer. At exactly 7:07, the heavy glass door swung open. Marcus stepped inside. He wore a bespoke charcoal suit, his posture radiating the innate, grounded confidence of a man who built a technology empire from a college dorm room. He kept his eyes on his smartphone, scrolling through a sequence of early morning emails operating on the relentless schedule of a chief executive. He approached the counter, ordered his standard black espresso, and stepped to the side to wait for his cup. I locked my tablet, picked up my leather tote bag, and stood up. I walked toward the pickup counter, timing my approach so we would intersect naturally. "Marcus," I said, keeping my voice level and pleasant. He looked up from his screen. For a fraction of a second, a flash of apprehension tightened the corners of his eyes. He had undoubtedly heard a steady stream of toxic fabrications regarding my mental state from his fiancée. He likely expected me to corner him to beg for my parents back or to launch into a hysterical tirade about the stolen wedding date. I offered a warm, professional smile, extending my right hand. "It is good to see you," I continued, my tone carrying zero hostility. "I realize the family dynamics are currently fractured, but I wanted to personally congratulate you on the upcoming ceremony. You have built a remarkable life for yourself." Marcus hesitated for a heartbeat before taking my hand. His grip was firm. The tension in his shoulders eased slightly, disarmed by my calm demeanor. "Thank you, Harper. I appreciate you saying that. I know the scheduling conflict has been difficult for everyone." I waved a hand, dismissing the drama with a practiced corporate nonchalance. Calendar disputes are temporary, business is permanent. I reached into the side pocket of my leather tote. My fingers brushed the cool metal of the encrypted USB drive. I pulled it out and placed it gently on the polished wooden counter, sliding it a few inches toward his resting hand. Marcus looked down at the small silver device, his brow furrowing in confusion. What is this? I did not break eye contact. I spoke to him not as a sister-in-law, but as a fellow executive auditing a vulnerable network. You are a brilliant engineer, Marcus. You built an impenetrable cybersecurity infrastructure for your company. You understand the necessity of identifying data anomalies before they compromise the entire system. But right now, your personal ledger has a critical vulnerability. His eyes shifted from the drive back to my face. The polite conversational mask evaporated. The tech founder surfaced. He recognized the cadence of a serious security briefing. Are you talking about Chloe? I am talking about basic accounting principles, I replied, my voice dropping to a low, quiet register that only he could hear over the hiss of the espresso machine. I strongly advise you to cross-reference the floral and catering invoices she submitted to you this month. Compare her quoted figures with the actual market rates for the Oak Creek Country Club. The math will not balance. I picked up my coffee cup from the counter. I did not wait for him to ask follow-up questions. A seasoned interrogator knows that planting a seed of doubt is vastly more effective than force-feeding a conclusion. If I stood there and explicitly called his fiancée an embezzler, his natural instinct would be to defend the woman he loved. He would view me as a bitter, jealous rival. By handing him raw data and walking away, I shifted the burden of discovery onto his shoulders. Marcus was a man who trusted metrics over emotions. If a trusted colleague warned him about a bug in his software code, he would not ignore it. He would tear the code apart line by line until he found the error. I was banking on that exact psychological reflex. One last thing, I said, pausing for a final moment. Do not let anyone sign binding legal documents or vendor contracts on your behalf this week. Verify every signature. I offered a brief nod of farewell, turned my back, and walked out of the coffee shop. I did not look over my shoulder. I stepped onto the busy sidewalk and hailed a car back to my agency. The physical handoff was complete. The bomb was officially ticking. That evening, Julian and I sat in our home office. The city outside our window transitioned into a sprawling grid of illuminated skyscrapers. Julian had his primary workstation powered on. He had not simply handed me a standard storage device. He was an attorney who dealt in digital forensics. The files on that silver USB were secured behind a specialized viewing portal. To open the documents, the user had to click a specific executable file that triggered an invisible secure ping to Julian's private server. We were not waiting to see if Marcus would call. We were waiting for the digital tripwire to snap. At 9:14 in the evening, a sharp singular chime echoed from Julian's desktop speakers. A line of green text populated on his black terminal screen. IP address confirmed, Julian stated, tapping a key to expand the log. The signal is routing from a private residential network in the Arts District. It is his loft. He plugged the drive in. I leaned forward in my chair, visualizing the scene unfolding across town. Marcus was a man of logic. He likely waited until Chloe went to sleep, or perhaps she was out at a final bridal fitting, drowning in the delusion of her upcoming triumph. He would have retreated to his home office, poured a glass of bourbon, and inserted the drive into his laptop, expecting to find a jealous sibling's petty grievances. Instead, he was currently staring at a meticulously organized financial autopsy. Julian had arranged the files with brutal clarity. Folder A contained the public rate sheets for the Oak Creek Country Club, proving that a premium package at that specific venue capped at $30,000. Folder B contained the counterfeit invoices Chloe had drafted and presented to Marcus, billing him for over $100,000 in services. Folder C was the executioner's block. It contained the routing history from their joint wedding account. It displayed the exact timestamps and wire transfer amounts matching the cash Chloe had siphoned. Beside those transfers, Julian had attached the public registration documents for the Delaware shell companies, linking those obscure entities directly to known predatory lending syndicates operating on the East Coast. We watched the server log track his progression. The digital footprint showed Marcus opening the rate sheets. 2 minutes later, he opened the counterfeit invoices. He is comparing the numbers, Julian murmured, watching the timestamps tick by. He is seeing the variance. 5 minutes later, the log showed Marcus opening the final folder containing the shadow debt routing history. He lingered on those files for a long time. The connection remained active, the documents held open on his screen. In that luxury loft, the illusion of a perfect partnership was disintegrating into dust. The woman Marcus intended to marry in 48 hours was not the refined, supportive partner she claimed to be. The files proved she viewed him as a bailout mechanism. She was bleeding his capital, forging vendor pricing, and treating his trust as an exploitable resource. A millionaire tech founder does not forgive a breach in the firewall. He does not excuse embezzlement due to wedding stress. He prosecutes. The server log registered a final action. Marcus safely ejected the USB drive from his system. The connection severed, returning Julian's monitor to a blank waiting state. I let out a slow exhale, leaning back against the leather headrest of my chair. Marcus had absorbed the truth. He was no longer a blind participant in my sister's charade. He was now an awakened asset, a man holding a loaded weapon standing at the center of the battlefield. Tomorrow evening was the scheduled wedding rehearsal dinner. Chloe had booked a private dining room at a mid-tier restaurant, planning to celebrate her victory. She intended to gather my parents and her prospective in-laws to revel in her stolen date and her stolen spotlight. She had no idea that the man sitting at the head of the table was currently evaluating her not as a bride, but as a critical financial liability, requiring immediate public termination. The trap was locked, and the countdown to the rehearsal dinner commenced. The eve of October 15th arrived with a cold, steady rain washing over the city. Inside our high-rise apartment, the climate was controlled, quiet, and engineered for maximum efficiency. I sat at my glass dining table, flanked by dual monitors, reviewing the final security protocols for the Silicon Valley product launch. My domestic wedding was a liquidated asset, but the corporate event stepping into its place required my undivided oversight. Julian sat across from me, reviewing a stack of trust documents, a crystal glass of neat scotch resting near his keyboard. We were not mourning a lost rehearsal dinner. We were monitoring a scheduled demolition. At 7:30 in the evening, my personal smartphone illuminated on the glass surface. The screen displayed an incoming call from Patricia. I did not reach for the device. I let the digital chime ring out, echoing in the quiet apartment until the call diverted to the automated messaging system. 2 minutes later, the screen lit up again. Richard was calling. I maintained my focus on the security blueprints, letting his call follow the exact same path. The voicemail icon appeared, a small red indicator of their desperation to control the narrative. I tapped the screen, routing the audio through a premium Bluetooth speaker on the counter. I wanted Julian to hear the precise tone of their victory lap. The audio file began with the unmistakable, chaotic background noise of a mid-tier dining establishment. The clatter of thick ceramic plates, the hum of overlapping conversations, and the sharp clinking of cheap glassware painted a vivid auditory footprint. Chloe had booked a private room at a generic Italian chain restaurant for her rehearsal dinner. It was a stark departure from the exclusive Michelin-starred tasting menu I had originally curated for our evening, a detail she undoubtedly hoped everyone would ignore. Patricia's voice cut through the static, slightly slurred, elevated by the consumption of low-grade house wine. "Harper, darling." My mother began, weaponizing a tone of manufactured pity. "We are all sitting here at the restaurant. It is a full house. Everyone is just so thrilled for your sister. I know you are probably sitting in that massive glass house right now, realizing how empty a room feels without your family." A burst of shrill laughter belonging unmistakably to Chloe pierced the background audio. "We really wish you had just been reasonable," Patricia continued, her voice dripping with condescension. "You brought this isolation upon yourself. Chloe looks beautiful tonight. Marcus is taking such good care of her. I hope you learn a lesson about compromise from all of this. Call us tomorrow if you need someone to talk to. We might have a few minutes before the ceremony." The recording ended with a sharp beep. Julian picked up his glass of scotch, took a slow sip, and set it back down. He did not offer a sympathetic smile. He evaluated the audio file like a piece of admissible evidence. "They are terrified," Julian stated, his voice a low, calm resonance. I looked at him, raising an eyebrow. "They need you to be broken," Julian explained, leaning back in his leather chair. "If you are sitting here, successful and unfazed, their entire justification for abandoning you collapses. They left those voicemails to reassure themselves. They are performing for each other." His assessment was flawless. My parents required my suffering to validate their favoritism, but while they were busy leaving toxic voicemails and toasting to a fabricated victory, the groom sitting at the head of their table was orchestrating a silent, lethal financial audit. The legal and financial sectors of this city operate as a tightly woven ecosystem. Secrets rarely survive the weekend. 10 minutes after Patricia left her voicemail, Julian received a secure encrypted text message on his work device. The sender was a senior partner at his firm, a man who shared a weekly golf tee time with the lead corporate counsel for Marcus's technology company. Julian read the brief message. A cold, sharp smile altered the lines of his face. He turned his monitor toward me. The message contained a single line of critical intelligence. Marcus had just placed his entire corporate crisis management team on an emergency weekend retainer. The USB drive I handed Marcus at the coffee shop had detonated. I did not need to be in that cheap Italian restaurant to know exactly how the evening was unfolding. The data Julian and I compiled was irrefutable, and Marcus was a chief executive who built his fortune by identifying structural flaws. He did not treat my digital drop as a jealous rumor. He treated it as a zero-day vulnerability in his personal network. While Chloe held court at the center of the rehearsal dinner, wearing a white cocktail dress and demanding toasts from her sycophants, Marcus sat at the head of the long table in terrifying silence. He did not smile for the smartphone cameras shoved into his face. He did not participate in the forced celebratory banter. He observed the environment with the cold, detached scrutiny of an auditor evaluating a bankrupt acquisition. Marcus looked at the centerpieces on the dining tables. Chloe had billed his joint account $10,000 for premium floral arrangements for the rehearsal dinner alone. The flowers sitting in front of him were standard wilted hydrangeas crammed into generic glass vases, items that cost perhaps $50 at a local wholesaler. He looked at the menu cards, noting the basic chicken and pasta options, cross-referencing them in his mind with the exorbitant catering invoices she had submitted to him just days prior. The aesthetic failure of the dinner was merely a symptom. The terminal disease lived in the ledgers. Under the table, shielded by the white linen cloth, Marcus held his encrypted smartphone. He was not checking sports scores. He was communicating in real time with his chief financial officer. Marcus had ordered his internal accounting division to bypass Chloe's weak passwords and pull the raw banking records from their joint marital account. He instructed them to verify the routing numbers Julian had provided on the USB drive. He demanded a full trace on the Delaware shell companies. The CFO delivered the fatal confirmation while Patricia was busy leaving her mocking voicemail. The text messages hitting Marcus's screen validated every single piece of intelligence I had provided. The shell companies were indeed registered to high-risk lending syndicates known for predatory collection tactics. The $200,000 Marcus had transferred into the wedding fund was gone. It had not been spent on deposits, vendors, or event logistics. Chloe had bled the account dry through a series of structured wire transfers, siphoning the capital to satisfy her shadow debt before the lenders could file public civil suits. The woman laughing loudly at the other end of the table, clinking her glass and posing for photographs, was a phantom. Marcus realized he was not looking at a future life partner. He was looking at a parasite. He saw a woman who viewed his trust as a programmable ATM, a mechanism designed solely to sanitize her hidden liabilities. The realization did not manifest as a chaotic emotional outburst. For a man who navigates high-stakes corporate warfare, betrayal crystallizes into a cold, tactical resolve. He recognized that her insistence on booking the October 15th date had nothing to do with astrology or spiritual advisors. She engineered a chaotic family war, stealing my date and my guests to create a massive psychological smokescreen. She needed everyone focused on the sibling rivalry so no one would look at the balance sheets. The dinner began to wind down. The waiter approached the head of the table carrying a leather folio containing the bill for the evening. Chloe leaned over, a practiced saccharine smile on her face, expecting Marcus to simply tap the joint marital card they had supposedly been using for all wedding expenses. She expected the endless flow of his capital to continue without friction. Marcus did not reach for the joint account card. He pulled a heavy, solid black corporate card from his wallet. He placed it inside the folio, ensuring the transaction remained entirely isolated from the compromised wedding fund. He handed it back to the waiter without breaking eye contact with his fiancée. Chloe's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of apprehension crossing her features. But her narcissism quickly overrode her survival instinct. She assumed it was merely an accounting preference. She stood up, smoothing her white dress, preparing to issue her final dramatic farewells to the guests. Marcus stood up slowly. He adjusted the cuffs of his tailored shirt. He did not raise his voice to demand the attention of the room. He simply waited for the ambient noise to die down. The sheer gravity of his presence commanded silence. He raised his glass of sparkling water. He looked directly at Chloe, his expression unreadable, a flawless mask of executive control. "To the future we deserve," Marcus stated. The words were brief, sharp, and laced with a lethal double meaning that sailed entirely over the heads of my parents and my sister. Chloe beamed, raising her glass of cheap wine, taking the toast as a validation of her victory. Patricia and Richard applauded, drunk on the illusion of their successful family coup. Marcus set his glass down. He leaned in, placing a cold, perfunctory kiss on Chloe's cheek. He informed her he had an early morning meeting with his legal team to finalize a few corporate structures before the ceremony. He turned and walked out of the restaurant, stepping into the rainy city night, leaving the parasite to celebrate her final hours of stolen glory. Back in my apartment, I closed the security blueprints on my monitor. The digital clocks on my dual screens ticked past midnight. The date rolled over. October 15th had arrived. The trap was primed, the corporate buyout was secured, and the groom was armed with the truth. The dawn was approaching, and my sister was about to walk into an execution chamber entirely of her own making. Dawn broke over the city with a sharp, cloudless clarity. The morning of October 15th had arrived. I was already on site at the Glass Conservatory by 5:00, holding a digital tablet and a cup of black coffee. I stood in the center of the sprawling botanical atrium, overseeing a team of 40 union technicians as they rigged a multi-million-dollar holographic projection matrix to the reinforced steel ceiling. The petty family wedding was gone, replaced by the global launch of a next-generation neural processor. The air inside the glass dome was electric charged with the aggressive, precise energy of a world-class production.